Your organization defends freedom of speech. Your site details attempts to curtail speech freedoms, particularly related to multicultural policies. Would you prefer there be no immigration to the EU?
No, that's not what we're about. We have no position on immigration as such. We simply insist on our right to describe the problems associated with, for example, immigration. So we hold no position on that.
What message do you think a guilty verdict for your hate speech trial would send to the European press and beyond?
Well, it's a very good question. I don't know. I hope it might be a wake-up call, but I'm not certain.
And what message do you think an acquittal would send?
I don't know if the press is really up to its job of protecting free speech. An acquittal would send a message to the general public that we can speak freely about matters that concern us. On the other hand, a conviction will put a damp on the willingness of people to speak out. And I fear that is the reason behind this court case. The prosecutor wants to close down criticism of failed multicultural policies that are so evident to most people.
You've been a supporter of Kurt Vestergaard since his publication, I should say, of his depiction of Muhammad caused a global scandal. What effect did publishing such cartoons have on media censorship in Europe?
I don't know if it's had any effect. I think it's clarified what the issue is. It has made those who are in favor of free speech more vigilant and determined to protect it, and it's made the foes of free speech more determined to crush it. So I think it has heightened the conflict between various forces in Europe.
Could you just clarify what you mean by those forces? What are those two forces?
Well, we have a sizable number of people in the country that are for multiculturalism, and particularly in what I would call the ruling class of the country. It is determined that our future belongs to perhaps not democracy as we knew it, but to some alien power that they want to protect. And it has to do, of course, with a lack of support for our traditional culture, way of life, our liberties, our democracy, and the West. They think we are doomed. They don't think it's worth defending. They keep blaming the West for all kinds of illnesses in the world and problems. Nothing happens in the world without it being our fault. So there is perhaps I don't know, perhaps a third of the population would tend to think that way. I think a majority is still in favor of our way of life, our democracy, equality between the sexes, free speech, etc., freedom, in short. So these are the forces that are against each other now, fighting it out. Unfortunately, most of the press is on the side of the enemies of freedom, I would say.
Why would the European press react that way?
Well, you have to remember that 9 out of 10 journalists in the country come from the same schools, have the same ideology. Journalists in my country are also very well paid, probably better paid than, for example, university professors and other people. It's a very lucrative job to be a journalist. They practically all think the same. They might as well be a political party. I mean, being a journalist in this country is not really a profession. It's more a political persuasion and an ideology. So we have very few journalists and very few media, mainstream media, that would really take on the fight for free speech.
So many people associate Europe with liberal values, with freedom of speech. Your website, though, depicts details, I should say, pressure of critics of radical Islam and how they've been pressured by authorities to curb what they want to say about it. Could you detail some of these cases?
Well, we have highlighted, for example, the case of Geert Wilders. As you mentioned, we have very much highlighted the case of Kurt Westergaard, the Swedish artist Lasse Vilks, recently the case of Elizabeth Savage Wolf from Austria. And if you take all these cases together, you can see that regardless of what you think of each individual's positions or politics, they all have this in common, that they are not loved, in fact hated, by the ruling media and the ruling class, the politically correct class. It seems these days that anyone who stands up against the ruling ideology is targeted and stands to be dragged in front of a court.
And why do you think the authorities are so focused on curtailing speech freedoms?
I think for the reason that their policies have failed, and failed utterly. For 30 to 40 years, we have been told by our leaders and practically all politicians and political parties that unlimited immigration is really a good thing for the country. It is a good thing for Denmark to have, for example, a sizable minority of Muslims in the country. We now have about 250,000, 45% of the population. And even though most of these immigrants, Muslim immigrants, have refused to integrate into our society, become part of us, we've constantly been told that this is an enrichment of the country. Problems do not really exist. Problems only exist to the extent that people say there is a problem. So, in other words, they want to silence critics because they think, or claim at least, that if they could shut up people like me or some of the other people I mentioned, or many others in the country, the problems would go away. If you cannot solve a problem, then at least you can silence those who say there is a problem. I would say most people, most immigrants, integrate wonderfully in this country. We have no problems with, say, Russians, or people from Vietnam, or from China, or from India, or from Sri Lanka. Most of these people create absolutely no problem. They are indeed an enrichment to our country. Then there are other people who are not. What is the problem? I'm a free speech advocate. I don't have the solutions to this problem created by our politicians. I can only say one thing, which is that the prerequisite for even being able to solve the problems is that we maintain free speech and protect free speech. Because without free speech, there is not a chance in hell that we could ever solve any problems in the country.
Now, you claim that the media elites willfully ignore the ever-increasing problem of immigration, yet German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and it was reported all over the world, stated that multicultural policies in Germany had failed.
Yes, and what did you do about it then? I mean, she also came out and condemned Theo Sarrazin, who published a book about the dissolution of Germany, and he was then widely criticized and condemned, as a matter of fact. Angela Merkel came out and said she wouldn't even read the book. She condemned the book and hadn't read it. I think that is a very typical reaction. But of course you're right, the fact that she would even come out and say multiculturalism has failed, of course, is an indication that things are not going as smoothly as she would have liked. But she still, she and others would still need to tell the population, what are we going to do about this problem?
How would you characterize the influence of Brussels on the media reporting on immigration policies?
It's absolutely crucial. You know, the EU passed a so-called framework decision in November 2008 that actually requires the member states to pass laws such as the one I'm indicted under. You have to criminalize so-called hate speech and racism and whatnot. Each individual country, member state, has to introduce laws that will guarantee that offenders against this rubber paragraph or rubber article will get between 1 and 3 years in jail. This framework decision also requires us to introduce laws penalizing so-called Holocaust denial. Of course, I'm a historian. I know very well the Holocaust took place, but I think such laws are criminalizing idiots, are very, very detrimental to any kind of free debate, because where does it end? What is the next thing that has to be determined in court? For example, who was responsible for the outbreak of the First World War? Well, you could say it was Russia, it was England, it was France, or Austria-Hungary, or the system as such. I mean, are we then, in a few years, going to having to go to court to determine how to settle historical questions? Who was responsible for Stalin? Was it the Bolshevik system? Was it Lenin? Was it himself or somebody else? I mean, these things have to be discussed openly in a fair public debate. It's not a question for courts to decide.
With that said, what do you predict the future is for freedom of speech and media censorship in Europe?
It is being decided right now. I'm determined to win, and so are my comrades in arms. We are determined to win. If we lose, it'll be gone.
Thank you very much for your time.